Welcome to another day with Zimaleta. In today's video, I'm going to be removing another fuel tank from a silver Sprinter. But I'm not going to bore you with the details of me removing it since I already made a video on that, and I think it's pretty clear as to how to remove it. It's not very complicated. But instead, what I would like to talk about today is the possibility of adding a second fuel tank. A lot of you guys have replied to me. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Mason. You have basically kind of like shared your thoughts about the fuel tank and pointed out to me the thing that I thought was possibly an attachment to actually suck fuel like into the system that heats the interiors of the van, kind of like the Webasto units and S-bar heaters. But I was really confused with that thing because I did not have any fuel line section to that thing. And actually watching my own video today, I started thinking, what if this is some kind of breather? Could it be? But then I'm thinking, if it's a breather, why does it have this sort of like a nipple thing on the, you know, like on a blue little thing? And that was kind of like really confusing. But the reason I started thinking that it's a breather, because looking inside of the tank, I see those plastic pieces kind of like sticking out, and they look very similar to the breathers that are used like in a regular like type of gas cans and diesel cans. You know, they look a lot different, but it's a kind of like a similar type of look to them. But I'm kind of thinking, why would you need two more breathers if there is sort of like a breather like that's like this wide? So like when you're filling up a tank. So I wasn't really sure because that breather is kind of small because obviously it's coming out from two ends and it's a really small type of breather. But I guess it does make sense somewhat because two sections of the tank, you know, has this breather. So in case there's, I guess, completely full of diesel on one side, another one's breathing, and vice versa, probably due to you going uphill and downhill, so you could still breathe, so that the pump does not have to work like extra hard. But what I actually want to focus on in this video is actually the idea that actually I have. But it's together kind of like with Joe's idea. Joe came up kind of like with a way to basically put these, you know, like both things together and cause it to like basically naturally, you know, to fill itself up. But it may require some special fittings and possibly some plastic welding and stuff like that. So I started thinking of the same type of way, except trying to see if I could simplify it. That's kind of like what I like to do is, if it's kind of like overly complicated, which it is really that, you know, not, but I'm kind of trying to think, well, what about if a novice would try to do this? Could he do it without actually having to weld? And what is the least amount of time that you could actually spend in actually creating this type of system? So I came up with a way that you could actually use original type of holes and still get the same outcome. But also, if you wanted, you could have a possibility of actually using those same fuel lines, like the return fuel lines on both fuel tanks and the fuel line that's actually trying to, you know, go to the fuel filter, to put some kind of fittings with some kind of switch. That way, that fuel would not actually be sucked in, you know, like into the engine. It would basically just, you know, kind of like, sort of like be waiting. So if that fuel pump goes out, you could flip the switch electronically, and then the other fuel pump would be connected. Since it would be really difficult to kind of get underneath to try to actually connect it, it would already be connected, and you could actually route the switch inside to, well, all you have to do is flip the switch, and the second fuel pump would be operational, kind of like a light switch. Kind of like a really simple idea like that. And obviously you would need a way to flip the switch on the fuel lines. So I started to kind of think, is it really necessary? I mean, possibly those fuel lines, you could just pretty much tee them in, you know, like, and I guess when you flip the switch and the other pump starts pumping, it's still going to pump the fuel the right way. I guess the only concern is because the other fuel lines are not cut off, it may be pumping slower. So the solution to this would be, I guess, to basically, and I'm kind of wondering if this is actually possible before I actually walk to the fuel tank, and I want to show you kind of like what I was talking about, how I would actually hook them up together. I think it's really logical, and I think you guys will actually like that. But before I get to that point, I want to kind of like work out the electrics and, things of that nature. Um, so I was kind of thinking that possibly you could have kind of like a switch going for the electrical, but also at the same time, it might not be necessary. There's actually some vehicles, like the BMWs, like those kind of like older ones. I'm not sure if like the new ones have this. The 7 Series, they actually have like 2 fuel pumps inside of like a single tank. So what if you could actually have 2 fuel pumps operational at the same time and basically sucking in the fuel? I mean, maybe like it would be good, like I'm not sure. Like, but like what I'm wondering is like, would you use more fuel? And I guess I'm thinking maybe like not. I mean, these engines are so electronical. If the engine's getting enough fuel, it probably will only make it work every once in a while or something, like, I mean, there's got to be like a way, like the technology portion, like where it takes over and it understands that you're getting enough fuel and it's just not making the pumps work as hard. But I guess the good thing about it is if one pump goes out, the fuel tank would still be right, basically continues sucking diesel from another tank, that kind of thing. But I kind of like the idea that I have is just to flip a switch and it just immediately takes over another pump. That way it's like, kind of like having a Rolls Royce. It's like you have like this secondary type of system. If one fails, you still have another one to keep going instead of having both pumps work at the same time. But I am interested in the idea of having both pumps work at the same time because this would actually solve the issue with the lines, the fuel lines. You could actually, tee them into the same type of connector, kind of like with maybe like a Y connector, like not so much a T. It's just to have like 2 inner lines and 2 outer lines, and they would be spliced into one. I kind of like the idea of like for to like either flip the switch or just to have 2 pumps be pumped at the same time. But I'm not sure like what would be the difference. Kind of like by having 2 fuel pumps, is it like better or they're just basically working overtime? I don't know. But anyways, let's go look at the fuel tank, and I'm gonna show you like my idea how actually I would hook it up. And I would actually not have this idea if Joe actually would not mention this to regulate the things as that idea, like like when I was writing a reply back to him, uh, I basically noticed that I started brainstorming like on this other idea. And that's kind of like what I'm talking about, guys. Sometimes when I share something in the videos, it's probably giving you guys some ideas and it might be related. You'll probably see a better way of doing something, and that's just the way I am. If I see an idea and if it's a great idea, I go ahead and use that idea. And Joe's idea is great, but I'm kind of thinking, how can you have that same idea but just simplify it? Like no plastic welding, like required. You could just use simple fittings and simple, stuff like that you could find in a hardware store. Put some clamps and you're good to go. All you have to do is figure out like a way to hang the tank. And actually to take it further, you could leave the other lines alone. Like if you don't need like that other fuel pump to be working, you could actually leave all those other lines disconnected. You could just basically cover the electrical with something. That way you're not gonna get any kind of like dirt in there, just in case you ever need that pump as a spare. And you could just basically cover up the fuel lines and stuff in the secondary tank, because technically you really don't need that stuff, because all you really need is an extra tank to pump the fuel. The only thing is, of course, you would need to leave that fuel pump in there, because what else you're gonna cover up the big hole with, unless you could get like like remove it and then put like some kind of like bigger lid. But I think it's not necessary. After all, you have a spare type of spare fuel pump in there. So if you ever need to take the fuel tanks down, you could just simply remove that one, stick it in that one, and stick that bad one in the secondary tank. and you could keep going, because it's really not that hard to drop these fuel tanks. I guess the biggest problem would be is where are you gonna dump 50 gallons of fuel? You need like a whole drum for this. That'd be like the only problem, like if you have like full tanks. And this is something I needed to figure out, because most of my sprinters, they already have like full tanks, and I only had like 5 diesel cans, and I had some gasoline cans, and I had like a kerosene can. So I kind of figured, well, I could technically pump diesel out of both vehicles if I wanted to. Of course, I'm gonna run out of run out of gas cans. But then I realized the one that's with the back transmission, my normal type of Sprinter that I drive, that's got over 1,000,000 miles. Last time I came home, it was pretty much almost like an empty, and I didn't fill it up because I kind of figured, well, I gotta do the transmission on it. I just switched all the insurances. It's not really necessary for me to fuel it up, so I kind of left it alone. So basically, I actually used that as a place where I dumped all the fuel that I actually pumped out of that one Sprinter. So let's go and take a look at that fuel tank again. And now I'm going to share a new idea with you guys that I've been meaning to share while it's still in my head. So let's take a look. Anyways, guys, we are at the fuel tank that I had removed yesterday. And here's what I was kind of like talking about, guys, in the video that I want to show you. Where I would like to actually, you know, like install a T connector, or could be a Y connector. It doesn't really matter. But basically, it's this pipe right here. This is the original fill tube. Basically, you know, like as you're fueling up, the fuel kind of like flows in here, and it connects with a rubber hose. But the good thing is there's about this much distance, you know, of rubber piping. The rubber piping is about this wide, and there's this much distance. So there's a good chance that you could get some kind of fitting. It does not have to be the same thickness. It might have a smaller type of end, you know, and a place, you know, to grip on. And then you could take this rubber piece, cut it like in half, and then use half of it here to secure it like with clamps, you know, this end, and another half, you know, to secure it like over here. And then you have sort of like this line, probably about the same thickness as this. No welding required. You could just have it sort of like sticking out, of course, and going into the other tank. So the other tank could be over here. So, you know, that line could actually travel underneath, probably be zip tied or something. But due to high pressures, because it's going to be a thinner line and that's much thicker, the diesel actually will travel, and it's going to equalize itself with another tank. Because as soon as that one is completely full, it's got no choice but, you know, to actually be pressed down and keep flowing, you know, inside of this tank. So I think it could definitely be done like that. And as for all these electrical systems and these pipes in the second tank, you could technically leave it alone and just basically close off this end and this little end right here, and of course protect the electrical connector. Oh, wait a minute, I see something else. Now this is very interesting. Look, guys, there's another outflow type of pipe. Now I did not remove this unless somebody broke it, but there's another outlet. Guys, this is really amazing. I just noticed this, because that means this is the solution that I was looking for. Now I'm wondering, what does it actually look like on this side? Basically, guys, of course, it is basically welded in there with plastic. So you possibly could just drill it out or remove it. Maybe there's something that's removable, and do some kind of fitting over here, possibly like one of those that self threads, and put like a fitting similar to this. Maybe do some plastic welding, I don't know. But guys, there's basically, this is an outflow. So this actually would answer the problem. If you want to connect like an S-bar type of system, you could use the same type of pump to where it pumps diesel, of course, you know, to the S-bar system. But the only, I guess, question that I would have is, yes, we have a way to connect it, but like, obviously, how is it going to be sucking diesel up without the mechanical pump? Unless it's got a pump of its own, or the Sprinter will actually need to be on for this pump to keep basically pumping diesel into your fuel filter, and then it's pumping from this, you know, into whatever. But that is actually really interesting. I'm glad I've noticed that. But basically continued, here's what I was actually talking about as far as connecting the electrical and connecting the pipes again, and to have them interconnected. That way you will actually have a secondary fuel pump, and if this one will fail, you could flip the switch and have that connected. So this is the way I would do it, guys, as per explanation. So let's pretend that this is the first tank, and behind it we're going to have the second tank right here. So on the tank that's behind, we're going to take this inner tube, and we're going to run a line all the way down, possibly using some kind of like lines, possibly man, like you could remove like one of these return lines and use that, you know, to basically extend it, because it would be really easy to connect it to this normal type of pipe. Or you could get some fuel lines, just a big rubber hose. They're not that expensive. You could get it at the parts store, probably like $1 a foot or something. And then of course from this inner line, run it all the way kind of like back over here, and of course this line would run all the way back here, and so both pipes would be over here. So you would need to connect that, you know, using a white connector to the actual fuel pump. Let me show you something. Let's say for instance you really did not need these type of fittings over here, this type of heating system. You could possibly close it off and, you know, but reuse these type of connectors. You could go ahead and remove this white connector here, and obviously you got this going on here, and this little thing, you could actually remove this whole thing and put both of those pipes kind of like flowing this way, attach them, and then of course this would actually be going inside of the fuel tank. You could I mean, you could see that this flow is this way, obviously, you know, but we would need it to flow that way. Basically we would not be using this, but we would use this white connector here, and this actually the section that would be connected to the fuel pump, that simple line. So there you could have two lines that could be going from both fuel pumps. And the return line, you could either connect the same system up and leave that as it is, or you could basically, you know, run it and maybe run this connector into like, so it actually returns into that other fuel tank, which would be the first tank. Hope it's not confusing. So if this is a secondary tank, you could just have the return line return into a different, you know, like your first tank, which is the main tank. That's actually where the fuel tank is working and it's pumping diesel, so it's be constantly like refilled. So you could actually do that. But at the same time, guys, this electrical connector would need to be used as well with some kind of switch, that you flip a switch, and now this fuel tank is the one that's actually going to be pumping diesel. And of course you would need an actual connector. In my case, I could just cut one off, another Sprinter, and use that, and basically connect everything using these special type of crimps, to where it's like you don't need to like peel anything, just basically crimp it together. So all the electrical connections would work. But I would actually keep this little system, and I would just reconnect a return line exactly the same way to this system. I would not use these connectors from this specific tank, if this would be the secondary tank that I would be adding. And in my case, this possibly will be the second tank that I'll be adding once I get ready to do that. Because I have, I think this one too that I could use. And for now, I'm not going to be using this Sprinter here, but I could probably use parts of that one and get my white connectors. I know I could probably go buy them at the store, but I'm thinking, why not use the original Mercedes stuff and spend some money and put that in my pocket instead. So yeah, guys, like this really, like, you know, I guess, like, I think to me, like, this really solves the problem of having two fuel tanks and having both of them fuel up. But of course, if you don't like this idea of equalization, you know, like with the pipes, if you think this is not sufficient, what you can do is, let's say this is your first tank right here. You could possibly find a place over here, probably like over here, like in the middle would be a good area, on this specific tank. And then of course you would have that other tank standing, and you could actually maybe do some kind of plastic welding and install a fit in here, like with basically like a pipe that's going here. Of course, weld it in, even though if it's gonna weld good and stuff, you could have it right here. And then once you fill up the tank, normally it's going to flow out, and you connect it to the inner of the other tank, which would be this type of pipe, and then it would be much shorter distance to travel. You could use a much thicker pipe, and it's going to basically travel. And because the tank has a breather already, that's simple. You could continue breathing, you know, and that would be like completely like fine. You know, it's gonna work. You fill it up, it's going to breathe proper way. And of course, these things are breathers as well. It's breathing out of this. You know, and when I was talking to you guys about this this thing yesterday, what really confused me is that it has a nipple right here, you see? And this looks like you could actually put like one of these fittings on here and stuff. And this was actually, it was like really throwing me off, because I'm thinking, what if this is actually a way you connect the S-bar system, you know? And, you know, with this little thing. But obviously, it is not, because it's a breather. There's no lines that's inside of the tank to actually suck up the diesel. There's none in that one. Per my video, when I actually removed it, I actually show you guys inside of the fuel tank. But of course, we do have this line right here, so you could just drill a little hole and then basically suck it out. But guys, here's the good thing. I'm getting ready to actually remove another fuel tank from the silver type of Sprinter, and once I do remove it, I will actually show you this little place, because that specific Sprinter actually had an S-bar system. When I bought it, the owner actually removed it and he kept it for himself. I told him that I'll pay him more money and just, you know, leave the system in there. But instead he said, well, I'll just remove it. It's 5 minutes to install, you know, blah, blah, blah. So he said there is actually already the fittings and stuff there, you know, if I wanted to install. So it's, you know, obviously that one already has a way to, you know, suck diesel and stuff, you know. So so that is good. That is good. So I'll be able to show you how it is done, because the way, like I said, I would do this one, probably drill it and maybe use a self-tapping type of a nozzle if there is such a thing. If there's not, use some kind of plastic welding. So anyways, guys, I hope you liked the video of me showing you guys the fuel tank and my ideas. Let me know your ideas in the comments below. Perhaps before I do this type of project, we could put our all ideas together and make the best one count. But as far as getting all these fittings to, in a future video, of course, I would like to go to like Northern Tool and Supply, check out, see what they got, maybe check out like Tractor Supply, see what they have, because they probably have some kind of fittings and some kind of like Y connectors and stuff. The biggest thing that I question is there kind of like a plastic type of fitting that you could actually cut a hole and twist in there? That would be like a really like a tight fit that you could actually put on another pipe, and then possibly do some kind of like plastic weld around it, and that would be it. Of course, you probably need to clean these parts really good, that way that the plastic stick. But I did see plastic type of weld, guys. This is tube, it, you know, like the two compounds they mix together, but it's a plastic type of weld, guys. So, you know, it's not something that you need to heat up. It's just basically kind of like anything else you would get like inside of the can, but it's just for plastic. It looks black, and I guess once it binds with the plastic, it possibly has some compounds that it melts into the plastic and really bonds like to it like really good. And of course, I think like for other ideas and stuff, you could technically use a metal type of fitting, possibly with something that would, as you're basically installing, like screwing it in, it really like kind of like bonds to the plastic like really good due to the pressures and stuff, and it really kind of like, you know, getting over there. And of course then you could weld around it and it would probably do the same thing. But I kind of think plastic fitting would be best personally, because it would be plastic and it would bond together, and I think it would really hold you know, together like longer. But let me know in your comments below if you have seen something like this, and where you could find it. That way maybe other viewers could kind of like discover this, because as you guys have commented in the videos below, it's a good idea, of course, to have a second tank, because you could really save a lot of money. Sometimes some of these states, they have really cheap fuel, like South Carolina, for instance, and there's others out there, like even like Missouri is cheaper fuel than say like Illinois or, you know, somewhere else. And Texas, of course, has cheap fuel. But some of the places actually don't have like good quality fuel, like in Texas, from what I noticed. But I had pretty good luck with HEBs and Walmarts. Not so much with like truck stops, because For some reason, I think the truck stops in Texas, they have more biodiesel, but I could be wrong. It might be all the same. I'm just kind of like liking one versus the other. But one thing for sure, you do save a lot more money by shopping at other gas stations, not truck stops. But if you do compare the gas prices at truck stops and normal gas stations, it's about the same type of price. Might be a very little difference. So you know, keep that in mind, guys, because it's obviously cars, but with trucks and stuff, they always get like a lot of business, so they could mark the price higher because they know there's a massive amount of trucks. They're not going to go to a diesel, you know, get diesel across the street because their truck is not going to fit there. So they try to use that to their advantage and maximize their earnings, you know, by charging truckers more because of the convenience. But for us, Sprinter drivers and other, you know, drivers like with pickup trucks that maybe like diesels and stuff, we could fuel up at other gas stations and get maybe better quality diesel because it's not sold in mass amounts, and pay a lot cheaper, sometimes 20-30 cents cheaper, guys. But anyways, guys, I really hope you liked the video. Please subscribe if you haven't already and like my videos. I really appreciate you guys. Have a happy new year, and just God bless you guys. So see you in my next year. Take care.